For those of you that are new to Armor, I wanted to give you a little background about the D&I team and just let you know that it is made up of a team of volunteers that are passionate about educating and celebrating our differences. The team is not afraid to bring up topics that are sensitive and really want us to just learn and grow from these conversations. We meet weekly, and in order to bring you guys content and information that is meaningful. And we've been meeting weekly really since the summer. So there's a lot of behind the scenes that go on. And I just want to recognize in no particular order the team that is active and engaged in these conversations. We have Caroline Malorn, Leah Clay, Katie Gonzalez, Emily McRae, Laura Rollins, Sumya Mohan, Marshawn Armand, Kenneth Denson, Cheryl Gant, and Katrina Lewis. So thank you all for your participation and bringing important topics up for all of us to learn and grow from. So with that, I'd also like to introduce Athena Trenton, and I want to thank her immensely for bringing us this presentation. It's going to be really, really exciting. And so just a little bit about Athena. So she is the Executive Director of NAMI, or the National Alliance on Mental Illness. She brings more than 25 years of experience in the fields of nonprofit management, developing communities of support, and cultivating future leaders. Prior to joining NAMI, she was a research director for Simmons School of Education and Human Development at SMU, the COO of Urban Intertribal Center of Texas, a health and social service nonprofit for Native Americans. Before moving to Texas, she was a well-established student affairs professional whose passion for building supportive communities focused on developing holistic, high-quality services for underrepresented students. Her main goal was to make sure that they had support and resources they needed to meet their highest potential. She's honored to have the opportunity to impact students at the California Institute of Technology, Columbia University, University of Michigan, and Michigan State University. After returning from South Africa as a part of a delegation invited to exchange expertise with social service professionals and educators, Dr. Trenton completed her doctorate in educational leadership at the University of Southern California, right on, and her master's in teaching and bachelor's in public policy were awarded by Michigan State University. She currently serves as the Dallas chapter board member of the Association of Accountants and Financial Professionals in Business, and is an alum of Business Council for the Arts Leadership Arts Institute. So I can't think of anybody better to lead us through this discussion than Athena, Dr. Trenton. Again, appreciate it, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Heather. I'm humbled by the introduction. It sounds so much different after you've written it when you're hearing somebody else read it. I'd like to say, first off, what I'd like to do with this is I'll present some information about, mental health, mental wellness, and, relate it to what we're going through right now, different support systems that we can develop, things like that, as well as a little bit about our organization and how we can be a resource for you as well. But I want to make sure that we have a safe environment. And I see somebody saying, Michigan State, go green, go white. Anyway, I would like you, I have made sure everybody is muted just for right now, because sometimes some people accidentally unmute themselves and we get some background noise. But what I'd like to do at the end, your CEO, Mr. Woodward, will join in and help us out a little bit talking about his story. I'll weave my story in as somebody living with mental illness into my presentation. But I also invite you, however safe we can make a virtual program to be, you are welcome to put comments in the chat. I may ask for people to give me suggestions about what they think about something I'm talking about. If you have questions, you can save them till the end. We can have more of a discussion. And see if it works unmuting people so that we can make it as safe of a space as we can. But to start, I am going to share my screen and see if that all works. Somebody give me a sign if you cannot see it, and we'll start from here. So why care about mental health? We name it, we say why care because there's a lot of people who still are not convinced that mental health is part of your overall physical health. It's just as important as treating somebody with diabetes, treating anybody with a chronic condition. Mental health conditions are not always chronic, sometimes they're situational. And there is a very wide spectrum of what is considered a mental illness or a mental health condition. So let's see. So let's first talk about, what is mental health? So it really has to do with the way we think and we feel and how we relate to others. It's, and there's socialization, and then there's something in your body and your brain that's telling you how to react to a situation. A lot of us think it's really a personal choice on your behavior, but when you have a mental illness, depending on what diagnosis you have, how extreme it is, whether medicine is helping you or not, sometimes that individual who is going through that recovery process is not able to make that choice on how they perceive or how they choose to react to a situation. And we'll talk a little bit about invisible illnesses in a bit. And this is really truly one of those invisible illnesses that nobody would know if you didn't tell them, because it's, as I weave my story in, I'll tell you how it's not easy, but you learn how to put on a happy face even though you're not so happy. But the important thing to remember is no matter how you're feeling right now, if it does become chronic, if you do, like right now, a lot of people have situational depression and anxiety. Dak Prescott, and I forgot the other gentleman's name who's on the Dallas Cowboys, both of them admitting that the current situation is affecting them. The isolation is very difficult. Working from home, especially if you're an extrovert. I can say my husband is an introvert and he never wants to go back to the office. He's loving it. But me as an extrovert, I want my office, I want my coworkers, and the monotony really sets me off of not being able to set a boundary between work and home. It's become very difficult for me. And then adding on the depression and anxiety that I feel, which for me, I'm in a good place. My medicine works, but for a long time I wasn't. And this comes to the second bullet point that I have here. I believed this for a long time, that I was weak. I didn't believe I had a mental illness. I blamed it on a whole bunch of other medical issues that I had and just said, of course I'm depressed. I have chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia and a whole bunch of other invisible illnesses all at one time. Of course I'm having a problem. I didn't feel that the depression came first. I didn't feel the anxiety came first. So it took until I became the executive director of NAMI North Texas before I recognized that it is not weak. It's not a lack of character. It's not poor upbringing. It's actually a chemical imbalance in your brain. And there's a whole spectrum of medical conditions that can impact a person's approach to situations, how they think, how they feel, and how they function on a daily basis. And we'll talk a little bit how that could potentially affect the work environment as well. Sometimes mental health conditions are genetic. It definitely affects the way our brain functions, our environment, our lifestyle, all of that. What's happening in the world today can all impact mental health. This is why more and more people are focusing on a holistic approach to wellness, because we need ways to decrease stress. We need ways to stay connected with other people, no matter how much of an introvert we are. The connection to other people, it's innate as a human being. You have to have some sort of connection, whatever connection it is that makes you, gives you what you need. But one important thing that even some medical professionals do not recognize is that this is a medical condition. And you can see by the way a person's brain is functioning. If you take a look at this slide, there are clear differences amongst a few of the different mental health conditions and the diagnoses. If you look at the normal brain scan, there's lots of color, everything seems somewhat evened out in the areas of the brain that are supposed to be functioning well. But if you take a look at the depression brain scan, you can see a lot more of the blue, less of the orange and the yellow. I am not a medical professional. As Heather mentioned, my doctorate is in educational leadership, so I can't go any more, beyond this slide than say, look at how different the brain functions are between a normal brain scan, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, and obsessive compulsive disorder. And these are only a few examples of a very wide array of mental health conditions. So this proves that it is a medical condition. And so this is where it's really important that our mental health professionals, our employers, our legislators, and our neighbors, and our general society starts recognizing that this should be discussed. Mental health should be just as important as somebody who has another chronic condition such as diabetes or that's the condition that we relate it to the most, because it takes a lifelong relationship with your medical professional and medication to control. Some people can get off their medication, some people can't. It really depends. But we'll talk about stigma on another slide, but to help open up this conversation and create a more open environment to discuss these things really helps us reduce that stigma and helps people feel more comfortable about saying, you know what, I'm having a bad day. I need to take, we joke about taking a mental health day, but some people really do need to do that. And having an employer, and just like Armor, who is very aware of how it can affect your work, how it can affect your day-to-day approach to life in general, and how you react and relate to other people. So I'm going to go over just a few quick statistics, just so you understand a bit about how prevalent mental health conditions are in the United States. I think the big one is this one right here in the middle that says 1 in 5 children and adults are living in the US experience a mental health condition in a given year. And that's counting the whole spectrum of a situational one-time incident. Maybe it was, the grieving the death of a loved one, and it took medical intervention to help with it. It didn't go away on its own. All the way to somebody who's schizophrenic and, thinking, they literally do think, some of them literally do think people are after them and are terrified and lock themselves in their homes and won't come out and are afraid of, anyone else coming in. So we have that whole spectrum. And so, if you think about it and you think about your entire team that you work with, even though we're virtual, you think about your team, if there's 10 people in your team, 2 people are likely to be suffering from a mental health condition, or at least in the recovery process. Right now, we don't have more recent statistics on this, but I bet some will come out soon. Since we're 9 months into the pandemic, I guarantee you that 1 in 5 will be significantly increased during this time. And you'll find more PTSD diagnoses, especially from frontline healthcare workers. And then depression is the #1 leading cause of a disability worldwide. And we'll take a look at how that impacts employment and even the financial aspect of being for the employer themselves. Sorry, there we go. And then this is the other slide of statistics. I think the important one on here is that 60% of adults with a mental health condition do not receive treatment. And we'll talk a little bit on another slide about stigma and why that happens. But if you're not receiving treatment for, let's go back to diabetes, if you're not receiving treatment, what happens? You get sicker. And it becomes more difficult to treat. And other things go wrong with your body. Same thing with mental illness. You can have physical problems as a result of your brain not working properly and having a mental health condition. I can tell you that now that I look back on everything, so I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia in my early 20s. And the doctor just said, there's nothing we can do for you, just consider yourself growing old early. And I wasn't willing to accept that, but it's like, if the doctors don't know what to do with me, how can I continue, working full time? What do I need to do? So I really had to focus on helping myself. And so the mental health, the depression, the anxiety was through the roof because type A, trying to achieve so many things and being so focused on my career. Failure was not an option for me. And to me, that made me feel like a failure, not being able to physically do anything and having the brain fog and all that. A few years ago, we figured out that it really had more to do with female issues. I had a hysterectomy, and the chronic fatigue, the pain, the fibromyalgia, all that's gone. But I still had the mental health issues. I still had the depression. I still had the anxiety. Once I was treated for that, and once I started working for NAMI North Texas and being okay with, and being okay speaking about the issues that I have, I can look back on my childhood and remember myself having anxiety, giving myself stomach aches. And this is where the physical pieces come in with mental illness is, some people have aches and pains all over their body that are completely unexplainable. I had stomach aches my entire childhood. I can remember having them. I can remember wanting to just hide in a room. I remember being suicidal and thinking that was just part of being a teenager. And that's how it was treated. Oh, you're just a teenager. Everybody goes through it. So one of the important things is making sure that we catch this early. Most people start showing symptoms in adolescence. A lot of people, if they're not treated in their teens, they go off to college. You probably have heard a lot of stories about people going off to college, and then that's where they have a breakdown, and that's where they need medical intervention, and then they're not able to complete that year, or maybe even they're not able to complete college at all because there was no early intervention. People didn't know the signs to watch for. I'm very lucky because, I didn't have one of the more extreme illnesses. Mine is depression and anxiety. But now I can look back and say, it would have helped me a lot if somebody had recognized it when I was a teenager and took my suicidal ideation seriously. I never followed through with it, but I really wanted to at times. I've got a couple comments in relation to statistics here. It's well known that 22 veterans die by suicide each day. That's very true. And there are a lot of organizations that focus on veterans' mental health and first responder mental health. A good one here in the DFW area that's very, very prominent and well known is called 22 Kill. If any of you are veterans out there, they actually have free mental health services up to 6 sessions, I think. And then I have another comment in the chat box. Mental illness is definitely not a choice. When I describe depression, I say my brain is broken. If you correlate it to a broken leg, your brain tells you to get help if you break your leg. When depression impacts me, my brain is no longer functioning to tell me to get help. I personally have a lot of tools to help me manage my depression, but this anecdote has helped my friends better understand what I'm experiencing when my symptoms flare up. And I thank you for that comment. That, and another veteran resource is Camp Hope in Houston. That's an excellent resource as well. So this comment is really helpful, and it put into words, so perfectly about how do you approach, if you're the one who is struggling, how do you say help? How do you say I need help? That's one thing I didn't know how to do. That was weakness to me. But what I've learned is that it's actually courageous to ask for help, courageous to say, I'm having a problem, because most people can't deal with it on their own and by themselves. So it does take courage. And so the person who submitted that comment, I commend you for the courage to be able to put that in the chat box when your coworkers are out there and they can see that. And that's what we hope to do. Is part of NAMI's goal is to make this conversation as normal as a broken leg, and talking about treatment to be as normal as I broke my leg and had to go to the emergency room. I had a mental health issue. I had to go to the emergency room and I had to be hospitalized for a week. But I'm better now and I'm good and I can work. After talking to Heather, it sounds like ARMOR has a really great program, employee assistance program, and health insurance to help all of you if you are, not just mental health conditions, but any other health condition where you need to seek medical assistance. And Heather will talk about your EAP program, at the end of our presentation today and our discussion. But something that is important to know, that if you don't get help for your mental illness, or if you have an employer, unlike ARMOR, who is not quite as inclusive with mental health care as ARMOR is, you can see based on this slide that it really costs the employer a lot of money, productivity time, and healthcare costs. Your insurance costs could be even greater. You may have to pay more for your insurance premiums, because as I mentioned before, if the mental illnesses go untreated, even more issues could be faced, and it could be even harder to address the issue. It may take more to address it. So as an employee, as a mother, as a father, as a brother, sister, family member, neighbor, what can I do when, so let's start out when I'm having a problem, okay? I mentioned before, it takes courage to admit when you're not feeling well. If you just had a cold, or if you did break your leg and you needed a day off, you would have no problem letting people know why you're taking the day off. Most people don't. Some people might still say it's nobody else's business. But when you do have a depression issue, or maybe you have schizophrenia and you're going through a medication change, and the medication change is not working, and you're regressing a little bit with your illness, how do you, most people would not tell anyone why they're taking those days off, right? So I'm not saying you have to, but the important thing is creating environment, a work environment, a family environment, a society overall that does make it okay to say that. And that's what we hope for the future, is that we can. What if you're worried about somebody else? If you're worried about someone else, it's not, not a bad thing to say how you're doing today. The important thing is not turning the conversation on yourself. I know in student affairs, I learned a lot about trying to relate to the other person and show you have something in common. When I started working in mental health, this is where I learned that it's not about you. It's about the other person, to sit back, to listen, and a lot of times that's all it takes. We receive so many calls from mostly family members, but sometimes people suffering themselves trying to figure out what to do. But a lot of times they're not looking for a solution. They're just looking for someone to take them seriously, listen empathetically, not being judgmental, not thinking, oh, this person's not going to be able to do his or her job. You know, those are a lot of the fears. And I'm sure a lot of people, you know, here today can relate to the fact that I can't let anybody know I'm having a very anxious day. You know, I don't want my work to suffer. I know it's suffering. I can't really explain it. I'm not going to tell people about it. You know, and if somebody asks you how you're doing, you put on a brave face, you smile, and, you know, can't wait to get done with work for the day. And so, you know, if you can see that in other people, if you know somebody's, even if it's just they're having a bad day, listen, recognize it. I can say if somebody just recognized it in me and said, let's just talk, tell me everything, what are you feeling, what's happening, and just let it all out. You know, if I had somebody do that for me before it got to a point where there was no other option for me, it would have made all the difference in the world for me. And then if it does get, you know, to a point where you think they are going to be a danger to themselves or others, that's where, you know, we'll talk about signs of that in a second. But if it does get to that point, it's important to know what resources you do have available to you, where you can call. And is it a 911 issue, or do you know somebody, you know, do you know this person's husband or wife, and are they at home, and can you talk to them? And also, there's mental health first aid is a really great class that helps you learn about all the different mental health conditions and how to approach people and what to do in a lot of different situations. I have another person with a comment in the chat box. I have helped my family members who struggle with mental illness for years, and this topic is important to me personally. Many are military. My son is in college now and has suffered from depression early in his life. We got him help, medications, and sometimes he seems to get better, and then he goes back to really dark places. Honestly scares my wife and I. What other advice can you share? I'm sure for all the parents out there, you would do anything to keep your kids safe and healthy and give them the best possible chance for a good life. Thanks. Absolutely. And when we get towards the end, I'll be explaining what resources NAMI North Texas has. But one thing I tell parents when they call us, or any family member, is it's really important to take care of you first. So that it's just like in the airplane, put on your own mask first. Make sure you are in a space where you can help your son. Because it takes just as much of a toll on family, especially parents, because, you know, it's important to know it's not, you're not the one to blame. A lot of parents blame themselves. What could I have done differently? You know, but the big thing is know where your resources are, and we'll go over that in a little bit. And do not blame yourself. Make sure you are in the best place you can be so that you can help your son. And we will get to resources in a little bit. I want to make sure we can get through everything within this hour that we have also. This is what I was talking about before, is stigma. So this is the main reason people don't get help, because they're worried about, you know, in the workplace especially, they're worried about people thinking they can't do their job. They're worried about losing their job. So who would admit that they have a condition that might compromise what they do, the quality of their work, the amount of their work, something like that. So, you know, we give sick days, we give some lenience on broken legs, diabetes, heart attacks, heart conditions, things like that. Why can't we give some lenience for people with mental health conditions? Because as you can see, stigma affects a lot of the every area of your life. So people do not seek access to information because they're afraid, well, if I'm at work and I do a search, is my IT department going to find out I'm searching for this stuff? Seeking proper treatment. A really good example is for first responders. They do have their own employee assistance programs as well, but they will not walk down that hallway into that door, because then all of their other police officers, all their other firefighters can see that they're walking in that door for assistance, and they don't want to be seen as somebody who won't be able to protect their partner. And so they turned to alcohol instead. And there's a very high possibility and a high, what's the word I'm thinking of? Instance of dual issues of substance abuse overlapping with a mental health issue. And it's like a chicken or an egg concept. Which one comes first? So substance abuse does influence, or is a large part of what we deal with, as well as we're helping people, because they do overlap. The other thing that, there's a lot of diseases that affect one population more than another. It's just genetics. The one thing to remember about mental health conditions is that they do not see color, race, gender, but there is a much higher prevalence of mental health conditions in BIPOC communities, and that's Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. And a lot of times that has to do with cultural stigma, or it also has to do with, those are the populations with less access to healthcare resources. They're lower income. They do not have mental health coverage, so they do not seek assistance. And so you find a lot higher rate of mental illness among those communities. And then another issue is the lack of diversity among mental health care providers. I don't know if anybody watches, oh shoot, I forgot the name of it. It just started back up, but it talks about, they have, sorry, was somebody?
Was it This Is Us?
Yes, This Is Us. Thanks, Mark. If anybody watches This Is Us, the latest episode was about, if you haven't seen it, there are triplets, but one of the triplets was adopted. And so you have 2 white and 1 Black child, and now they're adults, and the Black child is searching for a mental health professional who can associate better with growing up Black in a white community. So that's very important, and there are not a lot of options for people in those situations. So these are things to think about when somebody is looking for assistance, when when somebody is having trouble. Warning signs, this goes back to, if you're recognizing somebody who is having troubles, this helps you kind of assess the situation a little bit. If you look at it, look at these warning signs, they could have a couple, they could, it may not be any of these. There's a big, huge list, but these are the most common. Feeling sad or withdrawn for more than 2 weeks. I think, most everybody's feeling that right now. And that's, we're in a period right now with this pandemic that there are a lot of people with situational depression and anxiety. So there's going to be a lot of people who check that box. Some things that are fairly easy to recognize, especially if you're coworkers and right now you're only seeing each other over video, but there's the preoccupation with food, weight, or exercise, excessive use of alcohol or drugs. And sometimes you can recognize self-harming behaviors. You see somebody's arms, something like that. But these are some of the warning signs. If you see this happening, this is the time to start asking those questions. Are you okay? What can I do to help? and make sure that, listening with empathy and not being judgmental, because that, I can tell you from my own experience, that is the scariest thing, is to lose somebody's respect just because you're having a really hard time controlling your emotions and your thoughts. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. Treatment options. There's a lot of different things. You don't necessarily have to think about, you don't have to go to a medical professional. Some people are able to, especially in situational depression or anxiety, like a lot of us are having now, they turn to mindfulness, meditation, or yoga. Thinking about what calms you down, what do you enjoy, taking a walk. Right now for me, it's, even if I'm sitting alone in my office, because we are working remotely, but me getting out of my house and trying to separate work and home, that is very important for me. Before it got too cold out to jump in the lake, my husband and I have a lake house. And what I would do is, we've been quarantining there. And what we would do is, our commute, so to speak, was jumping in the boat and going for a boat ride so that we could decompress from work, get back home, have dinner, and it was just like a normal commute. Maybe it's a walk that you can do to separate that. But find ways, especially during this time right now, to find those positive coping strategies. Think about what they are. And one other thing I mentioned in a lot of the corporate presentations that I do, especially now that we're virtual, body language is an important thing. I can tell you, at first, my husband didn't want to use video when he was on his staff meetings. So he has a staff meeting every morning. They use Microsoft Teams, and no one was required to turn their video on. And I told him, I said, you really need to see the body language of people, because that's going to be really easy for people to hide when they're having issues. And I can tell you about one of my staff members who was having issues. And if I didn't have the video on and I didn't see her pulling her hoodie over her head, and in between her talking and her body language and realizing that something was wrong, I would have never known, because she never would have sounded different. So having that video on while you're having team meetings virtually is really important right now. And then if you are worried about somebody who is increasingly depressed, you think they might be hurting themselves or others, this is the National Suicide Lifeline. We have a warm line, and I'll give you that information. We answer our phones between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and we help people find resources, and we listen, but we are not trained to talk someone down from being suicidal. We have the Suicide Crisis Center here in Dallas. They're actually literally right next door to us in the Wilson District, downtown Dallas. And there's also the National Suicide Lifeline. And Heather has all of these slides, and she is more than welcome to send these to you after we're finished today. I have another comment. As someone who's been sober nearly 35 years, I'd like to mention that alcoholism is listed as a disease too, and that many alcoholics exhibit signs of depression, when in fact, alcoholism is the root of the problem. 12 steps programs are very successful here. Absolutely, perfect comment. Like I said before, sometimes you can tell which one comes first. Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes people self-medicate. But a lot of people are very successful with 12-step programs. And congratulations to you. And you should be very proud of yourself for being sober for 35 years. That is a feat in and of itself. And then to be courageous enough to note that in front of your coworkers, even more courageous. So I commend you for that. So that's just a quick run through on just some introduction to mental health issues and raising awareness, what's involved in working through those issues. And then I just want to talk a little bit about NAMI North Texas. And then actually what we could do, why don't we do this? I can go through this really fast at the very end. Mark, did you want to jump in at all and share anything relative to what we've been discussing?
Well, I mean, I shared my story with the Armor employees earlier, and I'll just to kind of, it's interesting to hear you talk through this. I've seen so much of this exhibited in my sister. She's severely bipolar. We started noticing, if you look back, started noticing signs of it when she was just 12 or 13 years old. She became, she self-medicated, became addicted to drugs when she was about 15. After that, she became an alcohol abuser, was in rehab multiple times. And it was all basically she trying to self-medicate. And I recall having a conversation with her when she was like 13 or 14 years old. And she says, I just have this weird feeling in my brain that I have to run or I have to go somewhere. And it was obviously when she was being, kind of obsessive, and it was the compulsive side of her, manic side of her bipolar disorder that was really kind of coming out, especially a lot initially. She wasn't diagnosed until she was 30 properly, and so wasn't actually put on proper medication until she was about 30. But the one thing I've seen her continue to struggle with until just very recently, where I've gotten really engaged in her health again, is that she and my mom, who also had a lot of these same mental health issues, started seeing a psychiatrist who initially had them on their real medication, ultimately got them onto Xanax, to the point of where as you continue to take it, the more you need. And he just continued to feed my sister such massive levels of Xanax that the problem became her dependency on Xanax more than anything else, trying to, as an anti-anxiety drug. So instead of treating the problem properly, a lot of doctors will sometimes just resort to the easiest path, which is psychotropic drugs or medication that really masks the problem, doesn't solve the problem. So she is now still, right now, going off of a slow off ramp. She's off of Xanax, they got her on something else, but she's realized what a problem that became. And it's, it's been like 10 years she's been on high dosage of Xanax. So I think something else you need to watch out for is doctors that tend to default to just, come and see me once a month for 30 minutes. I'm going to charge you a couple $100 and I'll refill your Xanax prescription. I mean, that's kind of what her life has been for 10 years. And I'll leave with just probably one interesting thing that she said to me, I think really sheds an interesting light on how you think about people like her, people with mental illness, is she describes herself as a sick person trying to get better, not a bad person trying to be good. And that's a really interesting way to look at it, because when my sister was younger, she alienated every family member through very destructive behaviors. And that, I was convinced she was a bad person. I had no relationship with her for probably 15 years until I found her literally homeless in downtown LA. And I bought a condominium that she now lives in Southern California because she literally cannot work. She can't support herself. So, but thinking of people with mental health as sick people trying to get better, not bad people trying to be good, even though their behaviors they feel bad to you, or they may exhibit anger or things that make you angry. That just gave me a great perspective.
Thank you, Mark. That's actually a really great way to put it, because somebody with a mental illness is not a bad person in any way, shape, or form. Like Mark said, they may do some bad things, but as we talked about in the very beginning, on one of the first slides, is that your brain isn't working properly. And, some people do literally hear voices telling them what to do. And there can be extremes where you can't work no matter how well your medication is working, just because it just, it's that extreme. But nobody's a bad person. It's just like that broken leg, just like the diabetes. It's a chronic condition. It needs to be, it needs medical attention. So what I'd like to do is talk about NAMI North Texas a little bit, and Other resources that are available, we've mentioned some veterans resources, we've mentioned the suicide crisis lines, Suicide Crisis Center. NAMI North Texas is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and no matter where you are in the country, there is a NAMI near you. Here in the DFW area, we have NAMI North Texas. We're based in Dallas, and our service area is Collin, Denton, Dallas, and Rockwell counties. And there is a NAMI Tarrant County, and their service area is Tarrant County, and then there's 4 other counties on the west side that they serve. So there's a NAMI for any county in North Texas. Even if it's not ours and you live over in Fort Worth, you can contact NAMI Fort Worth. All of our programs, all of our national programs are consistent. So no matter where you are, let's say you get a job, somewhere else, or you're relocated through Armor and you end up in Oklahoma. There are NAMIs in Oklahoma as well, and they follow the same national guidelines with their peer support groups and their classes that we do. So nothing changes, just the people and the local organization. So whatever I'm talking about here, you will always have a NAMI near you. So this is just an example of how many people we've helped in 2019. We'll have new numbers in January or February for who we helped this year, but we have support groups. We have Ending the Silence is a program we go into middle schools and high schools so that we can start that conversation early, and we can help middle schools, high schoolers, their parents, and staff members understand what the warning signs are. And then our teens receiving mental health training, that 2,409 are the number of teens out of the Ending the Silence programs that actually received that information. We talk about the 4 pillars in NAMI, and anywhere you go, all NAMIs follow these 4 pillars. These are our 4 objectives. We advocate at the national, state, and local level, and not just legislatively. We also help people advocate for themselves with their doctors. Mark mentioned that, his sister was not receiving the appropriate treatment, or, medical doctors will just start, prescribing pills, and they have certain regimens that they rely on, versus looking at the individual, because mental health and mental illness is a very individualized disease. So we also help people understand that they need to advocate for themselves and their family members. Our goal is to raise awareness and reduce stigma. We've been talking about that already. Our education classes, everything we offer from NAMI is no cost. So the majority of people that we help are those people without health insurance who are low income, but that doesn't mean other people who are seeing a therapist can't supplement, their work with their therapist with one of our support groups or an education class. They're very good complementary options to understand the bigger picture of mental health, and with our support groups to just have a community around you that is non-judgmental, going through the same thing that you are and can relate. We have family support groups because family members need just as much help as the individual in recovery. So I'm going to go through this fairly fast. This is just an overview of our offerings. So we have 2 types of support groups right now. Connection is our peer support group, and family support group. Everything is virtual right now. So on Tuesday evenings from 6 to 7:30 every week, we have a family support group. And Thursday evenings, 6 to 7:30 is our peer support group. And you can go to our website, naminorthtexas.org, and you can register ahead of time and join those groups. You can join anonymously, change your name on your video. It's all over Zoom. So you don't even have to talk. You can just sit back and listen and just see what it is and see if it's right for you before you actually participate. Nobody is required to do anything. These are the primary classes we offer. Peer-to-peer is, and only peers can be part of that class. Family to family is for family members. And these classes go through everything from the medical aspect, stigma, developing a supportive community, what's happening for you, how can you help your family member. It goes through the whole spectrum of the experience, either living with or being a family member of somebody with mental health. NAMI Basics is for parents of minor children, and NAMI Homefront is for veterans. Ending the Silence is for adolescents and teens. In Our Own Voice teaches people how to tell their own story. So if you want to learn, if you want to start developing your own story, you could join NAMI North Texas or the NAMI near you, and we can actually help you learn how to develop your own voice so that you can advocate for yourself. And then we mentioned, and then Mental Health 101, that is basically what we're doing right now. That's this presentation. NAMI Smarts is our advocacy program. If you would like to start advocating at the state level, we train everybody in January, and when there's something that the Texas legislature is voting on, we will go and take a bus down to Austin to advocate for it with our state reps and our senators. And then I mentioned mental health first aid earlier, which you can also take through NAMI or other organizations, because that is not a NAMI program. It's its own national program in and of itself. And here's the fun part of being part of NAMI. Every year in May, we have a NAMI Walks. This is our big fundraiser of the year. And we have sponsorships from everything from mental health hospitals all the way to companies like Armor, so that they can show their support for the mental health community and get exposure within that community, gain customers, gain recognition, things like that. But most importantly, we're raising money so that we can continue to offer everything that we do for free. The fun part of this is that you can turn it into a competition. Say Armor could create a team, raise money, and maybe you have a rival company in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. You can have a competition between each other, and we'll even help out with prizes within that competition. Or maybe it's within Armor and you have different departments and you want to compete with each other on raising funds and have a prize for the winning team. But we were virtual last year. We're going to be probably virtual again this year, but when it's in person, it is at the Dr. Pepper Ballpark in Frisco. And we get over 1,500 people, and it's an amazing gathering of community members and supporters of the mental health community. And it's so important to have more people, every year, because that way we see the mental health community grow, and there's people out there who are there to listen and who are non-judgmental and there for you. This is our information. Again, you'll get the slides from Heather, but if you want to take down our phone, like I said, we take calls from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. We have our email, and then our website has resources on it as well. There's a few people who put some additional information. Actually, this is a good one I'd like to share in the chat box. Medication saved my life when I was 15. I absolutely agree with Mark that it's imperative to be aware and understand treatment and find a doctor you trust. But one of the stigmas I've struggled with is people thinking that I am weak or crazy because I take medication. That's very common. I thought the same thing, and I would not admit that to people for the longest time. Not until probably within the past year would I admit, or even admit to myself. I've been on and off antidepressants and anxiety meds ever since I was in my early 20s, but I never actually even admitted it to myself that that's what it was for. It was just because of the other health conditions I had, that I had to take them. What I have is a chemical imbalance in my brain. I stay alive and functioning member of society because I take medication and manage my illness. Medication doesn't help everyone, and medication can make some mental illnesses worse, but I encourage people to think of antidepressants much like insulin for diabetes. It serves a purpose for some people. Exactly, and that's a big piece of the message that we were trying to make sure you all had today. And then Heather says, thank you everyone for sharing your stories. If you are interested in small groups to continue the dialogue, please send me an email and I will assist with coordinating. So that shows that ARMOR is very, very supportive and inclusive of all employees. And I would like to commend ARMOR as well, Mark and Heather and everybody involved with making sure that you get the information we have today, as well as creating smaller groups like Heather just offered, and all the other resources that ARMOR's providing. And thank you, Mark. I see you have to drop out. Thank you for joining us. We have one more slide. Heather wanted to get in before we ended to tell you about what is available to you at ARMOR. So I'm going to hand this over to Heather, and then I will hang out as long as people have questions. We'll unmute everybody, and I will be happy to, have a discussion after Heather's done.
Sure. Yeah, thank you everybody for hanging on. I know we're going a little over, but just to quickly tell you, if you do have to drop off, this information is on the HRKB under mental health resources. So you can find some flyers and a summary of this information. But we do have a number of resources in addition to NAMI. The link to NAMI is posted as well. But MetLife, if you are experiencing some of these life stresses that are listed here, would like to talk to somebody, or if you have a family member, that's going through things that you would like some resources. MetLife is our EAP program, and so the phone number is there as well as the website. It does provide 3 free consultations. What we would recommend is if when you start here and go that route, we would just make sure that the provider that you're using is covered by Blue Cross Blue Shield, because after those 3 sessions, it can turn into like a medical copay, and it would be covered, the in-network benefit level under our Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. If you're not covered by our medical insurance and you happen to be on a spouse's plan or you waive medical, we still have resources available for you through Fresh Bennies. And this is the new behavioral health service that's going to be available starting January 2021. These are fixed costs and they can range anywhere from $85 to $225. But you would just go to that Fresh Bennies application and look up counselors or therapists that are available based on your needs. So 3 great resources: MetLife, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and the behavioral health through Fresh Bennies. Happy for you guys to go and look at that information out on the KB as well. But again, I want to thank everybody. The whole intent of the diversity and inclusion team and these courageous conversations is to create a safe space so that we can continue the dialogue. We want you to know that we support you and are here and look forward to continuing the conversation. I want to thank Athena and Deanna for being here hosting this. As a gratitude, we want to donate $500 to NAMI, just to thank you for your time and effort to put this together to help with the overall fundraising. Since we couldn't participate in the walk this year, hopefully next year we'll be able to participate even if it's virtual, so we can raise even more money. So just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to educate us all.
Wow, thank you, Heather. That is absolutely fabulous. And the donation is unexpected and very welcomed, and we appreciate you.
Sure, anytime.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. I'll let them continue to go on. Everybody might have meetings at 1 and everything, but thank you for joining us. We had a great turnout. Enjoy your day, and don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions.